Thank you all for joining us tonight. We'll do a quick review of the latest EU guidelines with regards to the wine labeling legislation. Our discussion will be quite brief today, and let me set a couple of ground rules as far as the following things are concerned. First of all, any kind of question you might have, you more than welcome to actually post it on the chat section of today's webinar. In addition to that, both the actual presentation as well as the additional relevant files, documentation, and directives that we will mention today will be available to all of you. We'll actually send an email after the webinar with all of the relevant information. Now, without any further delays, let's jump on today's agenda. We'll actually do a quick review of the latest news with regards to the EU digital wine labels legislation and applicability. We'll definitely focus on the questions and answers with regards to the implementation of the latest EU wine labeling provisions as provided by the European Commission this November. Obviously, we will not go through all of those Q&As. There are actually 40 of those, but we will focus on specific subsections of those questions and provide some additional, clarity and information with regards to what is necessary. Finally, we will mention what are the important EU documents and directives that you definitely need to have in mind and at hand to obviously review on your own to make your decisions moving forward. And we'll end today's session with a couple of ideas and sort of a roadmap for the next steps for any winery selling their products in the European Union. Now, the situation in the European Union as far as the digital wine labels legislation is as follows. On December 2021, we got a new directive which has become active as of December the 8th of 2023. During July this year, we actually had an additional element applicable to that regulation, and that's the fact that wines produced prior to that active day, December 8th, 2023, are effectively exempt from complying with that directive, which is crucial and quite important to have in mind. And sort of the final missing piece of the puzzle was released by the European Commission late November 2023. And it's a document containing 40 implementation guidelines, 40 questions and answers, based on the feedback that the Commission has received from all interested parties during the last couple of months. Now, as far as the original directive, there's no point in going to a full scope detail in the sense that none was included. The only element which is relevant to our discussion today is paragraph 42, which is essentially a high-level overview of what needs to happen as far as compliance is concerned moving forward, and effectively describes the environment in which the wine labels post December 8th, 2023 must be adherent as far as containing both nutritional and specific and detailed ingredients information. And that directive actually provides two alternatives on how that can be achieved. The first one, which, as I usually say, is something that no one really wants to do, is to actually include a full scope description of both the ingredients as well as the full detailed table of nutritional declaration in the back label of the product. The alternative is to actually have a digital signage using a QR code, which when scanned actually provides the digital wine label, effectively a web page, which conforms to the regulations of the European Union and provides all the necessary nutritional and ingredient information to the consumer. So this is the environment where we stand. Now, the latest addition to that puzzle, as I mentioned before, were the 4 implementation guidelines, which we received from the European Commission late November 2023. These are broken down into 4 subsections, as clear in the slide that we are viewing right now. It has a preamble with 5 general questions. However, within those general questions lies sort of one of the key elements that designates how you must conform moving forward, and we'll take a glimpse of that. It follows with a wide range of questions with regards to the list of ingredients and the nutrition declaration. Not a lot of new information within those elements. To a large extent, within those questions, you will find pointers to the FIC regulation. FIC stands for Food Information for Consumers, which is a past regulation, still active, still mandated by the European Union. And finally, we have a bunch of clarifications with regards to the electronic labeling. As I mentioned in the beginning, we were not going to go with an exhaustive sort of description of all of those questions. We're going to focus on specific ones, provide you with the key elements that you need to be aware of. And as I already mentioned, at the end of the webinar, you will receive all of the necessary documentation so you can go through them on your own, which is something that we definitely encourage you to do in order to have a proper view of what is necessary in order to be compliant. Now, as far as those initial general questions that I mentioned, number 3 and 4 are absolutely crucial. Those 2 questions are effectively sort of the gatekeeper on whether your products currently have to comply with the latest regulation immediately or not. These get quite technical. You definitely need to, discuss these with your enologist and the people responsible for the production of your wines. But effectively answering those questions according to the clarifications that the European Union has provided will allow you to have a clear view of what kind of compliance environment you have on a per product basis, right? So these questions are not general. These questions need to be asked and answered on a per product basis of what you're currently producing. And as I mentioned before, these are the key gatekeepers to understand whether you need to immediately fully comply with the latest regulations or whether you have sort of a bit of a leeway as far as, postponing the full compliance with the latest regulation of the digital wine labels. Question 19 has to do with the nutrition declaration. What kind of elements we need to include and how it needs to actually look like. This actually points to the FIC regulation that I mentioned before, which is also one of the documents that you will receive. It's quite clear as far as the structure that it needs to follow. And it also goes hand in hand with question 22, which has to do with how one would go about calculating the nutritional declaration. This is also something that is described within the FIC regulation. Over here, we're providing a high-level overview of the necessary tables and conversion factors. But as I mentioned before, you'll get all of the necessary documents in order to be able to go through them on your own at your own time. And obviously, we're more than happy to answer any questions in addition to what we will go through today. We've already provided information within the chat section for you to contact us in the future. Now let's go to the electronic labeling portion of the Q&A of the implementation guidelines. Question 26 is quite interesting because it already mentions the possibility to utilize additional digital, let's say, touch points other than the QR codes. There is a mention of a possibility to utilize a chip, which effectively, in today's technology means utilizing NFC tags. This is something that we have already taken into account since the beginning of creating the FlexiQR platform. And we already support both the adoption of QR codes, which we see as the most relevant solution, at least for the time being, and potentially within the next 1 or 2 years. But we already support the adoption of NFC codes, if you wish to choose so, in order to accomplish, the digital touch point that is necessary for the consumer to actually, sort of kickstart the um, digital wine label appearing on their mobile device. Obviously, with the QR codes, you scan optically, which means that you need to open up your camera and point it to the QR code so that the mobile device can actually scan it and point you to the relevant web page. With the adoption of the NFC tags, there's no notion of optical recognition. You simply touch your mobile device to the location within the back label that is designated with that specific NFC logo. Let's go through a bunch of additional questions, which are quite interesting, and we know from experience from several of our clients that are, quite interested in some of those topics. First of all, can a QR code be added as an additional sticker? This is applicable, in the case where you already have pre-existing labels printed and potentially, already on the bottles, but could be utilized in additional cases such as a wine in bag, box in bag situation. The European Commission doesn't preclude the utilization of stickers, but it has some specific guidelines on what those stickers must adhere to in order to be acceptable. So definitely something to look at if you're in that situation. Is it possible, question number 30, is it possible to link via QR code or similar the electronic label presenting the full nutrition declaration to the homepage of the producer as part of its website? Something that several producers had in mind during the last couple of months, but it was quite clear already, and it now becomes crystal clear that this is not acceptable. The wine label must not be part of the website of the producer, predominantly because the European Commission feels that this sort of provides marketing elements to the whole process, which is something that is not in the spirit of the regulation. Question number 31. Can manufacturers specify additional QR codes on labels other than codes that are electronic means on which marketing information is displayed? This is also something that several producers contemplate due to the fact that the EU digital wine label QR code cannot contain, and this has become quite clear with the additional guidelines, any type of marketing activity or information. They contemplate the possibility to utilize additional QR codes within either the back label or within the bottle itself. This is not eliminated as a possibility, but it has to be clear which QR code is actually the ingredients and digital wine label QR code and which QR code is not. So there's a notion of clear designation and something that we will clarify in some of the subsequent questions. One of the key changes that came about following the sort of release of those guidelines. Finally, question number 33, would you be able to, add the website address, a URL, effectively on the label? No, again, this is not considered as full compliance with the regulation. The inclusion of a label link to the winery's e-commerce website is considered as a marketing purpose. So this means that within the digital wine label, we no longer are able to include any type of links, either to the winery or to social media or etc. It has to be a rather clean web page containing purely the information designated by the Commission. Question number 38 is extremely important. It's one of those new elements that came into being with the guidelines, and this is the fact that the QR code, which points to the digital wine label, has to be clearly identified within the physical label with a textual declaration. This could be the word ingredients or a local version of that word if your products are going to a specific market, but it needs to have the clear designation with the full word. So, for example, including the letter I possibly embedded within the QR code is not considered as compliant. It's not enough. Finally, question number 40 deals with the sort of life cycle and the lifetime of the QR code. Over here, the Commission clarifies that the QR code and the respective web page must be active as long as that product can find itself at the hands of a possible client. So there's no time limit. There's no sort of life cycle designated by the EU. So, for example, that this web page must exist for 5 or 10 or 15 years. It's rather left to the provision of the actual market, right? As long as that bottle containing that label, which contains that QR code, is out there, and there's a possibility for a consumer to actually scan it, the respective information on the web page must be active, must be live. Now let's take a look at how a possible, digital QR code plus ingredients text looks like. So over here you see a label which includes a QR code element and has clearly described it with the ingredients word above it. FYI, this is a vintage 2022 wine. So for this specific wine label, it's not necessary to include the nutritional declaration in the printed label, something which is mandatory for wines produced after December 8th, 2023. Let's take a glimpse at the key EU documents and directives that you need to have in mind. And as I mentioned already, these documents will be sent out to you post the webinar via email. So we have the original directive, which is sort of the starting point for this whole discussion with regards to digital wine labels in the EU. We have as a second quite important document now, those 40 questions and answers. And finally, as I already showcased, there are several pointers within the 40 Q&As to the FIC regulation. So these documents are something that you need to be aware of. Soon enough, you will have them in your email, and you definitely need to go through them with the respective people in your organization, which can, sort of translate and decode several of the elements and the directives included within them. Finally, what are the next steps for a winery, either within the EU or outside of the EU, but definitely, practicing the marketing and the sales of their products within the European Union? First of all, crucial, absolutely super important. You need to go through questions 3 and 4. We already mentioned them from the 40 implementation guidelines, and you need on a per product basis clarify and understand what is the status. Can you actually utilize the exemption because your product is being classified as produced prior to December 8, 2023, or not, in which case you must immediately comply with the full scope of the directive. Secondly, you need to start working towards generating QR codes. You definitely need to include QR codes in every new label that you print. And you gradually need to start creating your own digital labels. Now, this is where we come. This is where the FlexiQR platform comes. And one of the key elements that we bring to the table is the fact that we detach those 3 steps from each other. So with the FlexiQR platform, you can immediately generate any amount of QR codes that you need for your products. You can place those QR codes in physical labels, and you can start programming their behavior at a later stage. The QR codes are active, And at any point in time, you can start changing their behavior, you can add your digital labels, etc. Number 5, you need to start taking into account the fact that moving forward, you will need a full list of ingredients and nutrition declaration. Within the 40 questions, as we already showcased, there is a clear explanation of how those elements need to look like. There's also additional information as far as the deviations or the thresholds that are acceptable within the European Union for any type of measurement. So this is something that you need to start taking into account, understand, and start working towards. And finally, crucial and absolutely important, for any product which is considered to be produced after December 8th, 2023, you need to have both a QR code with a clear ingredients designation, as well as the nutritional declaration, and printed on the back label, you need to have the amount of calories. So this is something quite important. This is something that we already saw in the beginning, but in the alternative of utilizing the digital wine label that we discussed, you have the digital wine label, you have a QR code, you have the designation of ingredients. When scanned, this QR code will produce a digital wine label, but you still need to have on the printed back label a sort of short designation, not the full scope table, of the nutritional declaration. This needs to be in the form of the letter E, followed by the overview, the summary of the nutritional declaration per 100 ml. This is also clearly designated within the 40 implementation guidelines. So this is where we currently stand. I'd like to thank you all for participating in today's session. We have some additional information for you already on the chat section. So both an email that you can utilize to contact us directly, as well as a URL in order to take a glimpse at what the FlexiQR platform can do for you, because it covers much more than simply the compliance element of the digital wine labels for the EU moving forward. We remain available for any additional questions you might have, and within the next 24 hours, you will all receive an email with the presentation that we went through today, as well as the 3 necessary documents that you might have in mind, you need to go through and understand. So you'll have all the necessary information to start working towards the specific next steps that we have designated. I'd like to thank you all for your time. We'll be in touch via email, and we're more than happy to accept any additional questions that you might have via email or direct contact to us. Thank you all so much. Have a nice day.